really is. So right now, America's tax code is a total dysfunctional mess. The current system has cost our nation millions of American jobs, trillions and trillions of dollars, and billions of hours wasted on paperwork and compliance.
Now, this is an important point. No losses will be borne by the taxpayers.
Where their tax dollars are actually going.
Stop using taxpayer money.
Taxpayer dollars.
Taxpayer money.
Taxpayer dollars.
Taxpayer money.
Taxpayer dollars.
Taxpayer money.
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 $4.5 million of taxpayer money.
Taxpayer money.
Now, I know there have been some rumors going around. Well, I am here to put those rumors to rest. They are true. In terms of money, we have no money.
The Taxpayer Money Myth, Grace Commission Report.
Good evening, global citizens.
I thought it would be funny to do the
Taxpayer money.
catastrophe in the style of Nova, which it's fine. It's fine.
So you know the government is taking 40% of my taxes, and Uncle Sam, I want to know what you're doing with my f***ing tax money, because you know what I'm saying, like when you donate to a kid from a foreign country, they give you updates of what they're doing with your donation. I want to know what you're doing with my f***ing tax money.
And that, in my view, is what this whole controversy comes down to. Are you entitled to the fruits of your own labor?
President Ronald Reagan signed Executive Order 12,369.
Nice.
Titled The President's Private Sector Survey on Cost Control, to find out where exactly our taxpayer money went. The tax receipts were gathered, surveyed, and publicly documented at the presidential level in the Grace Commission Report of 1984. Page 12 states, resistance to additional income tax would be even more widespread if people were aware that 1/3 of all their taxes is consumed by waste and inefficiency in the federal government as we identified in our survey. Another 1/3 of all their taxes escapes collection from others as the underground economy blossoms in direct proportion to tax increases and places even more pressure on law-abiding taxpayers, promoting still more underground economy, a vicious circle that must be broken. With 2/3 of everyone's personal income tax wasted or not collected, 100% of what is collected is absorbed solely by interest on the federal debt and by federal government contributions to transfer payments. In other words, all individual income tax revenue are gone before one nickel is spent on the services which taxpayers expect from their government. Now let that sink in. Quote, all individual income tax revenue are gone before one nickel is spent on the services which taxpayers expect from their government. End quote. It's official. There is no taxpayer money. It's a myth. It's a fraud, a front, theater. And the disappearance of our taxes hadn't changed since 1984. It was like that before, and it only got worse after, by an order of magnitude. The IRS collected $666 billion in taxpayer money in 1984. Leap forward.
In 2022, Americans paid almost $5 trillion to the government in federal taxes alone. So what do we get?
You get nothing!
Not one nickel was spent to run the federal government as officially pitched.
The problem is, our whole tax system is built upon trust. And if people lose faith in the IRS, the whole system by which we fund everything is in trouble.
Because here's how the system works. The basic tax proposition is simple. You pay taxes to the government in the form of the money. The government pools that money and uses it to provide the people with essential goods and services that they need. But there's one catch.
And there's no money in here!
There is no taxpayer money. It's a myth. It's not pooled. It's not spent on essential goods and services. The money was laundered out of the system by the IRS. We shouldn't have any faith in the IRS because our taxpayer money disappeared. The people who profited from the system wanted it that way. That's the catch. The tax revenue doesn't matter because the federal government was always fully paid by some other means. We could have given them nothing in taxes, and still everything would have been paid in full. The proverbial they did not want us to know. Their job depended on not knowing, and on not telling us if they did. The US federal deficit was nothing but staged propaganda and accounting trickery. Was the term taxpayer money used as a neurolinguistic hijack? Here is President Barack Obama selling the myth of taxpayer money.
This is the commander of the Thessarius. You are being taken under our power to your destination.
The more people know, the more effectively we can govern, because we think we got the facts on our side in a lot of these debates.
See that sucker over there?
You got baited. You got baited. You got baited.
That's one of the reasons why we've spent a lot of time trying to develop, for example, this federal tax receipt, which we started and we're continuing to refine. We think it's a terrific way for people to get information about where their tax dollars are actually going, because, as many of you know, sometimes people's perspectives in terms of how much of their tax dollar goes to foreign aid versus education versus defense versus interest on the national debt. Understandably, people don't always have a perspective on that. And we think that the more people know, the better they will be able to judge.
Oh, you see this guy? See this guy? Number one bullshit guy.
You're a lying dog-faced pony soldier.
Propaganda. Words of deception. A federal taxpayer receipt website is not the actual receipts. That's our perspective. If there were a nickel of taxpayer money, they would have done another audit to prove it. Just like the original Grace Commission report, to earn our trust. But that never happened. It's not happening. And it won't happen. They won't let it happen. Because they know. There is no taxpayer money. It's a myth.
You don't know it already. There's a real marriage between the media and the government in telling the public what they want the public to believe and know.
There would be too many questions if a second Grace Commission report turned up
Trillions and trillions of dollars
in stolen taxpayer money.
So what is y'all niggas doing with my money? What is y'all doing with my money? I want to know. I want receipts. I want everything. I want to know what y'all niggas doing with my money. What is y'all niggas doing with my money? Uncle Sam, I want to know what the you're doing with my motherfucking money.
And how exactly was the federal government funded if not by taxpayer money? And what do we do about it?
It's fine. It's fine.
First, where did our taxpayer money go? Officially, it's uncollected, consumed by waste and inefficiency, and the remainder spent on federal debt interest payments and transfer programs. Transfer programs are where people got cash directly from taxpayer money.
Such as Ponzi schemes disguised as retirement plans,
Social Security, and also temporary assistance for needy families, food stamps, Medicare, and disability payments. Interest payments were made to the holders of the federal debt, like the Federal Reserve, who issued the federal debt to begin with, and other foreign central banks and nations like
China.
and also investment firms and investors. But wait, half the money the IRS collected completely disappeared by waste and inefficiency?
Shenanigans!
Whose bank accounts were getting padded? The IRS acted like a captured institutional black box with a quantum mechanical cat-like interior where money goes to disappear. In 1993, Diversified Metal Products versus IRS Italia, it was answered that, quote, the United States of America hereby denies that the Internal Revenue Service is an agency of the United States government, but admits that the United States of America would be a proper party, end quote. The IRS was not an agency of the United States. We'll see how they were actually subcontractors employed to collect debt. Yes, glorified debt collectors.
I don't have time to go through many details, but suffice it to say that after about 2.5 years of part-time, off-duty research and investigation about these claims, I couldn't help but conclude that there was a mountain of evidence indicating that the IRS was indeed deceiving the public, and they're breaking the law, they're stealing people's property.
The franking privilege allowed actual government agencies to send official communications without postage. But the IRS used postage in their official mail, which affirms their non-governmental status. The IRS was clearly not who or what they presented themselves to be.
Even state governors have publicly demonized them.
Governor LePage didn't want to talk about the outrage he sparked when he compared the IRS to the Gestapo, the Nazi secret police. But when we pushed him for a comment, here's what he said.
It was never intended to offend anyone.
Anna von Reitz has an interesting analysis that there were two IRS. One was called the Internal Revenue Service Incorporated. The name is spelled out in full and was a foreign private for-profit corporation subcontracted by the British Territorial United States government to collect excise tax on the wages of military members. Basically, all U.S. military members were considered British Navy seamen for tax purposes, and their taxpayer money went to the British monarch.
Ooh, look, Homer, the IRS.
The other IRS was just the IRS, Inc., in abbreviated alphabet soup code. It was a foreign, private for-profit corporation also subcontracted, but by the Vatican Municipal United States government to collect gift and excise tax on the receipts of all other legal persons, known as citizens. These taxable legal persons are not living people, but deceased corporations legally imbued with personhood, and that are only presumed to exist, civiliter mortis.
Civiliter mortus.
The legal identity with a legal name was presumed by attorneys in government to be you, or that you legally appeared or manifested as their property.
Wait a minute! Who are you?
These IRS were agencies of the Department of Treasury, but the Department of Treasury was a trademark, not an institution. A trademark abused for the purpose of fraud by the International Monetary Fund and particularly the United Nations. That was how the IRS was not an agency of the United States of America, but simply a collections subcontractor employed by the United States under the UN. The United States were creatures of the United Nations as a member state.
Well, you're absolutely right, Judge. You know, what we have to look at is the President is the chief executive officer of this corporation called the United States of America.
They were not governments, but corporate franchises, like McDonald's. But instead of fast food, they provided governmental-like services.
I'll have 4 tax burgers, 1 IRS switch with hold of lettuce, 3 dependent-sized sodas, and a frappuccino.
Fill out Schedule B. You should receive your burgers in 6 to 8 weeks.
Let's see here.
This service sucks. Let me speak to your manager, boy.
Member states got their legal identities from the United Nations. The UN was the single global issuer of legal presence identity for their member states, and by the way, for CERN as well. U.S. military personnel, U.S. citizens, and citizens of the United States were all international legal personalities under the UN called United Nations nationals. Everyone was imbued with that global citizenship as a condition of ending World War II with Italia, found in the Paris Peace Treaty of 1947, Article 78, Section 9A. For claiming to be a citizen or national of our local UN member state, we were made UN nationals, which were also defined as de facto World War II war criminals.
That's what global citizenship is all about.
The IRS were subcontracted to collect tax on these legal identities. Signing IRS forms, like the W-4 and 1040, was agreement and admission under penalty of perjury that we were taxable federal employees and an IRS withholding agent. Our legal identity was presumed to be employed by the IRS to service our own tax on their behalf, without compensation nor consideration, mind you, which technically, by law, the IRS was required to pay us to prepare.
Tax preparers have all sorts of ways to set their prices.
Anna von Reitz states in Service and Taxation,
a withholding agent is a warrant officer in the Queen's Merchant Marine Service, and you have unwittingly sworn under penalty of perjury that you are one. You automatically become subject to British territorial United States statutory law, are presumed to have voluntarily given up your political status as an American, and are required to file and keep filing taxes every year thereafter. If you don't, you are not doing your voluntary quasi-military job duties, and if you complain that you aren't really a withholding agent, you are dead in the water because you have already signed on the dotted line that you are one.
Where our taxpayer money went depended on who subcontracted the debt collection upon who. Was it the United Nations, or the British monarch, or the Federal Reserve? Were we United Nations nationals, or British seamen, or maybe receipted subcontractors on ice at the Federal Reserve warehouse?
What is it? Can't you see that I'm in the middle of a pep talk?
It's fine, it's fine. So, how were federal services paid?
Show me the money!
Sir?
What?
Are we being too literal?
No, you fool. We're following orders. We were told to comb the desert, so we're combing it.
Ludicrous lead. No one can show you the money. The money literally came from nowhere. It was loaned into existence from nothing as debt by fiat in violation of double-entry accounting standards. At some point, the bills for the federal government were receipted as IOUs, promises to pay, and underwritten by or under the authority of some bank, central bank, governmental treasury bank, or international bank like the World Bank or Bank for International Settlements. Former IRS agent tax whistleblower Joe Bannister says it.
The U.S. government finances its operations from the unconstitutional creation of fiat money, not with revenue from income taxes.
It's just a matter of where along the pipeline did the federal receipts become underwritten IOUs, and who profited as the underwriter, creditor, and holder of the financialized nothing.
Found anything yet? Nothing yet, sir. How about you? Not a thing, sir. What about you guys? We ain't found shit.
When it came to governments and corporations, nothing was actually paid for, only pledged as payment to pay by creating new fiat money. Imagine if you didn't have to pay your bills, but only had to pledge payment to make payment. That was how the banks and governments created new money, and maybe even two all-dishonored negotiable instruments like checks after 3 days. Ultimately, all UN member states paid their bills by fiat hypothecation and rehypothecation rather than directly with taxpayer money. So put simply, there was plenty of government money to help Maui and Ukraine, and everything else, even corruption. Imagine that. It's just a matter of allocating the infinite fiat debt money. If the funds to help Mauians was limited, it's because government officials chose to only provide limited funds from their infinite wellspring of debt money.
This sucks! It's fine, it's fine, it's fine. It's fine, it's fine.
Lastly, what do we do about it? In 2015,
we collect $3 trillion a year in a voluntary compliance system. If the compliance rate goes down by 1%, either because people think the chances of getting caught are down, or because they can't find out the right information, or they just get aggravated with us, a 1% decline in the compliance rate costs the $30 billion annually. Voluntary compliance system
is critical to the integrity of the U.S. tax system, which is only functional because taxpayers voluntarily pay their taxes. According to the National Taxpayer Advocate, 98% of all tax revenue paid by American taxpayers is paid voluntarily. 98% is voluntarily.
We have to maintain the confidence in the system because it's a voluntary system of payment of our taxes.
Agreed.
Inexcusable activity took place because it erodes the confidence of the American people in a system where they participate voluntarily. We need to clean up and clear out so we can go back to the business of making sure that people respect the fact that we have a voluntary system of paying our taxes.
It's probably ultimately damaging to the sense of voluntary compliance, which underlies our entire tax system.
IRS commissioners like John Koskinen and others publicly told us over and over that IRS taxes were voluntary.
Voluntary compliance system. Voluntary compliance. Voluntary compliance. Voluntary compliance. Voluntary compliance.
Exactly. The IRS compliance rate is entirely based on...
I volunteer as tribute. I believe we have a volunteer.
Ignorance and fear. So be bold and hopeful. IRS taxes were always voluntary for most people. Income tax truthers and whistleblowers have even won their IRS court cases, proving its voluntary nature. But more on that shortly. We can't get to solutions without understanding the issues. So first, a little history, then the whistleblowers themselves, and lastly, we'll cover ideas for grounded action and inaction.
Don't do anything. Don't try to surf. Don't do it. The less you do, the more you do. Let's see it pop up. Pop it up. You're doing too much. Do less. Pop down. Pop up now. Stop. Get down. Get down there. Remember, don't do anything. Nothing. Pop up.
The situation came about during World War II. The British Territorial United States Congress implemented a victory tax program by which patriotic Americans could volunteer to be compelled to pay tax like federal government employees. Enforcement was placed on the employers to automatically deduct the tax from wages, and the money was supposedly put towards the war effort. Millions of people signed up under false pretenses.
Yes! Yes!
By September of 1945, the Second World War fighting was essentially concluded. But the victory tax did not end. Its legislation simply set the end date as the end of hostilities. And that's the problem. The United Nations was not a law of peace institution. It operated under law of war, with the continued World War II hostilities repurposed against the people. The proof is here in the Law of Peace Pamphlet Volume 1, Department of Army 1979, Figure 1. The UN Charter operated under law of war, also known as humanitarian law in the Department of Defense Law of War Manual. Both the Axis and Allies lost and surrendered to the United Nations. The UN was the only official government that won World War II. All nations had to be belligerent and bankrupt to join the United Nations, and then their national belligerency from World War II was not actually ended upon annexation, but was continued and repurposed as a weapon of identity and lawfare against their people.
But you can't expect to wield supreme executive power just because some watery tart threw a sword at you.
The trusteeship of the national bankruptcy was bestowed to the UN Secretary General for management, and then the national belligerency was then turned against its own people in the form of making everyone UN national war criminals, and covertly converting all local courts into UN-franchised military tribunals to act on us as UN nationals. That actually explains U.S. jurisdiction over Julian Assange despite the 11th Amendment. Everyone's domestic as UN nationals.
I mean, if I went round saying I was an emperor, just because some moistened bint had lobbed a scimitar at me, they'd put me away!
As member state or member nation corporate franchises, these invaders were subcontracted under the United Nations to provide the services of government through law of war, occupying belligerent power against the people. Again, they're not actual governments. The UN militarily occupied us through our own institutions as a franchise system. Under the UN, citizenship was more like a Walmart membership card being intentionally confused as the card holder. But the membership card is not the card holder, even if it has your picture on it. We unwittingly identified as their legal identity persona by calling ourselves citizens.
Did we just, switch bodies? Oh, maybe we did.
The IRS legally taxed citizens' work under the continued hostilities of the United Nations. The law of war nature and effect of the United Nations cannot be understated. Without the United Nations or U.S. membership, then the IRS could not collect the voluntary victory tax on ordinary Americans. the presumption of income tax would finally be over. Even fictitiously identifying as citizens, whistleblowers have shown that IRS taxes were voluntary for most Americans.
Often all it takes is a single spark.
District 12's very first volunteer erupt.
But my hands are registered as lethal weapons.
Hey everybody, Josh Seartson of World Alternative Media here, and we are joined by Sherry Peel Jackson. And first of all, I really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I wanted to ask you about, first of all, for you to go into your background with the IRS for those that aren't yet aware, and what brought you to become somewhat of a whistleblower against the IRS.
Well, what happened was I was working at the IRS thinking that I was doing my duty helping collect the tax, and nothing was going on. I quit the IRS for family reasons, but after I left, people started coming to me and saying, hey, you know, I've heard that the income tax doesn't apply to us, so we're not supposed to be taxed. And I didn't do anything with that until someone alerted me to a full-page ad in the USA Today that was put out by a group called We the People Foundation for Constitutional Education, and it said, Dear We the People, the income taxes is a fraud. And then within the body of that article was a book by Joe Bannister. Joe Bannister was a former Criminal Investigation Division agent. I said, oh, you know, he knows my language. And then there was another thing within the body of that. William Conklin was offering $50,000 for anybody to prove that we have to file and pay. So I said, oh, boy. So I ordered Joe's book, and I started researching because I said, I really want this $50,000. I can do a lot with 50 grand, you know. And I started researching, and I said, why is it so difficult for me to find this law? I can find all these little regulations, and nothing's matching up. And discovered that there is no law that requires most Americans that live and work in the 50 states to file an income tax return or pay an income tax.
Damn! Voluntary compliance.
In my research, I realized that there's no definition of income in the code. They have taxable income, gross income, net income, and all that, but income is not in there. So I researched and found out that income is corporate profits, which goes back to my Walmart story. If they made $100,000 today and they had expenses of 20, then 80 is their profit and they pay tax on that. We don't have a profit because I drained myself. I was sweating when I finished cutting your grass, Sarah. I was sweating and I was tired and I used my life force and you gave me something for that. That's an even exchange. So I started talking and then they got angry. Aaron Russo, that made Trading Places with Eddie Murphy and The Rose with Bette Midler, decided that he was going to do a documentary about the IRS called America, Freedom to Fascism. It's still out there online. He interviewed several of us. He brought us out to Hollywood. And then the government started noticing that there were these people out here, some of them former IRS agents, some of them CPAs, some of them attorneys, constitutional attorneys that were, you know, just talking about the income tax.
Hope. It is the only thing stronger than fear. A little hope is effective. A lot of hope is dangerous. A spark is fine, as long as it's contained. So contain it.
And they wanted to shut us down. So they had congressional hearings. They did not allow us to talk. And that's when they started prosecuting us. So they prosecuted Joe Bannister. He had great lawyers, and he had a thinking jury that said, you know what, this man believes what he says.
But due to constitutional limitations, most Americans are not required to file income tax returns and pay income tax.
But by the time they got to me, they sent people down from Washington, D.C. to prosecute me. Now, there were others that got convicted also before me, like people in the tax movement, like Larkin Rose.
Don't you dare be one of those greedy tax cheats who starts to think that maybe handing over the fruits of your labor to the worst people in the world isn't actually good, isn't actually useful, doesn't actually help society or the country, and only serves, enriches, and empowers crooks, thieves, warmongers, and psychopaths.
But there were others that were acquitted also, like Bernie Kugelin.
An agency which will unlawfully impose a tax that doesn't exist is not going to care.
And Tommy Cryer, which was a lawyer out of Shreveport, Louisiana, they hadn't filed in years. And Tommy had all of the Supreme Court cases and state Supreme Court cases to prove that income was corporate profits.
We all know that if there were a law making us liable
that they were showing to us by now.
By the time they got to me, that judge would not let me say anything about the law. She kept saying, I will instruct the jury on the law. Well, I needed to tell them what I learned so that they could see that I was credible. But it was like a three-ring circus. And they got me for willful failure to file, which is a misdemeanor. I just didn't file tax returns because I knew that I needed to keep what I earned. So they took the 4 years where I was making over $100,000. So they made the jury hate me because they kept saying over and over that, and this year she made 100 and this year she made 150 and this year, and she didn't pay.
Where's the money, Lebowski?
And then even when they took the jury into deliberation, I had so many supporters there that I had a stealth supporter that was following them. And he said that when they put the jury in the deliberation room, the bailiff, before he closed the door, he said to them, if I got to pay, she got to pay. And then he closed the door. So I got a 4-year sentence on a misdemeanor, as opposed to putting the sentence concurrently, which means I served 1 year for the same charge. They did it consecutive. And not only that, they added time to it. So instead of a 24-month sentence, they gave me a 36-month sentence. They did an upward departure because I was so fierce out there in the community, telling people that they need to do their research and figure out who's robbing them.
Voluntary compliance.
So they decided to put you in prison for longer than the statute even calls for.
Voluntary compliance.
I know with our own case, when we were suing Google, I know the goons came in and controlled it, and the court system had no control. They just did what they were told. Is that what happened in your case, you think?
No, I think they all worked together. It was so strange that the judge, first of all, when they read the 4 guilties, she got up and left. I've never seen that before. Everybody else was talking about it. She just got up and she didn't say anything about we're going to have a sentencing hearing or anything. She just got up and left. That was telling to me. And when we did have the sentencing hearing, this is what she said. And I'm going to say it in her voice. She said, I know you homeschool your children, Miss Jackson, and I know you got a lot of family support, but you can't run around the country telling people not to file income tax returns. And I looked her in the eye and I said, I've never done that. So obviously at that point, it wasn't about the fact that I kept what I earned. It was about the fact that I was exposing what was going on.
Shut up, will you? Shut up! Now we see the violence inherent in the system. Shut up! Come and see the violence inherent in the system! Help! I'm being repressed, bloody peasant! Oh, what a giveaway. Did you hear that, eh? That's what I'm on about. Did you see him repressing me? You saw it, didn't you?
I just do believe that all of them are in together. It's not that I know that they're all in it together to make sure that people like me do not get to the point where I get too popular, because I was speaking a lot back then. I was speaking all weekend, and I had gotten to the point where my weekends were full and people were trying to fly me in on the Thursday before I go somewhere else, because people want to hear the truth.
Voluntary compliance.
Oh, that's interesting. So one thing, though, I think what we saw is people really believe it was the right thing to do, and they become almost a cult-like behavior. So people believe you need to pay your taxes, because if you don't pay your taxes, then we can't support all these services and stuff. Where do these taxes go?
So that's what I was speaking about. And that's, I think, what was so dangerous, besides the fact that I was telling people that this tax issue is a racially unifying issue and not dividing. They were afraid that everybody's going to get together on this issue. Ronald Reagan, back in 1984, commissioned Peter Grace. So Peter Grace had the Grace Commission, and the Grace Commission came back with like a 2,500-page report. They say that not one nickel of the money collected in income tax goes towards running the country. So the country advocated its responsibility of taking care of the finances to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is a non-auditable private banking cartel. They're collecting over $80 million an hour in interest from the American people. Go out and look at the debt clock. If you put in the debt clock, if you put that in your search engine, you'll see how much debt we're accumulating. They're not accountable. So the money goes to them. So what we're doing when we give our money to them is
shut up and take my money.
We're paying for the owners of the Federal Reserve and their children and their children's children and their children's children's children to never have to work a day in their life. And I work pretty hard
I came to these conclusions that there was really a problem. I came to the conclusion that I had a duty, even by the IRS's own employment manuals, I had a duty to do something about it.
We're in trouble.
We are in trouble. Sarah, we are in so much trouble because there's something called cognitive dissonance. And that's when people have been told the lie so long that when they hear the truth, first of all, they rebuke the truth and until it has to slap them upside the head. And sometimes right now, the truth is knocking at the door and they don't want to open the door because they would have to admit that they've been living in a lie. Like I had to admit when I started finding out the truth about the income tax, the truth about the Federal Reserve, the truth about our healthcare system. It was like a rug got pulled under me. And yeah, I hit my kabunkum on the ground when the rug got pulled, but I got up and I said, you know what? Let me dust myself off and figure out which direction I need to go based on what I know now, but they don't want to know.
You can't handle the truth.
Voluntary compliance.
The average person in the public who doesn't have the 3 letters after their name, who doesn't have, just why would you study tax law or accounting if you're not in that line of work? But that puts you at a disadvantage, and here these people are just making up these allegations that have no basis whatsoever.
But first, slap the like button now.
If the majority of people actually understood it, they can go after a small few, but they can't go after a majority.
Yes,
Yeah.
I hear people all the time that say, I don't care what the law says, I care what they can do to me. That's the sentiment.
This call is brought to you by Empire Collect. Would you like to accept or die?
Yeah, accept.
Fellow Americans are being railroaded by our government.
Well, I think that's true. I think people are very scared that if you don't pay it, you're going to lose everything or they're going to clobber you. And so it is a slavery thing because if the money
Trillions and trillions
is not going to any of our services, it's just going to these fat hogs that are just wanting to depopulate us anyways. And we keep sending it in. The only reason we're doing it is because we're fearful and we're afraid. It's the same as if you were actually a slave. The only reason you're staying there is because you're afraid.
Yes. So I do group teaching for a year. And throughout that year, it's the KPG system. You learn to keep what you earn, first of all, protect it and make it grow. So I teach. And then after that, it's Zoom. And I teach the class. And at the end of the class for an hour or so, I'll answer questions. So those people come every week and then they get their questions answered and then they get the teaching. So that's what I do now.
I didn't really want to get into the Democrat versus Republican because I think all parties have a lot of issues. Okay. What do you think about all that?
I haven't voted in at least 2 decades because my belief is changing the players without changing the game is an act in futility. I believe that the Democrats and the Republicans are in the same bed and they're screwing us all. And I believe that it's just a big kabuki dance.
Don't hate the player, hate the game, son.
Voluntary compliance.
Nothing has changed for us over the last 6 decades. Nothing. All of us are going down in income. We're going down in quality of life. We're going down in education. They want the government to tell them what to do, and they hold the government responsible. And neither one of these parties is doing anything. That's your proof right there that they're sleeping in the same bed. There's no difference. So the people that were questioning before, they were censored. And now it's coming to light that they were telling the truth. So this whole thing was a plan. The government people, they are vagabond marionettes. And the puppeteers are the ones that you don't see that are behind the scenes that are pulling the string. So our president and all these people, they don't run a country. They're people behind the scenes that run a country.
Try to take over the world.
Earthman, you must realize that the planet you lived on was commissioned, paid for, and run by mice.
And then I know that it doesn't matter, Sarah, what color we are. I'm black, you white. I'm a Christian. You could be a Jew or a Muslim. What doesn't matter? They don't care. They don't care about all that. They just want to keep us down. And until we realize that, they're going to continue that game of their modus operandi being divide and conquer with all of this stuff. They don't care.
That's the way the ruling class operates in any society. They divide the rest of the people. They keep the lower and the middle classes fighting with each other so that they, the rich, can run off with all the money. Fairly simple thing. Fairly simple thing.
You know what? It's not even really about switching over to the Republican Party. It's about making sure that I understand what's going on in my world, in the world at large, and figuring out what I need to do for myself and my family.
The the public knew the truth, they would no longer believe the lie.
Voluntary compliance.
I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be interested in this. So thank you so much, Dr. Sherry. I really appreciate it.
You're quite welcome, and thank you for having me on.
So what can we do? This is not legal advice because everything legal is fiction. No one should accept legal fictional advice as real or valid on the face of it by definition. Our signature was weaponized against us under Uniform Commercial Code to mean signing receipts as their legal identity for us. It is not ours. By signing, we become surety for the legal identity person that is contractual party to the IRS code when we ourselves are not party to the code. If signing paperwork is unwittingly affirming fraudulent legal presumptions, then a solution would be to not sign their paperwork. Personally, I will not be complicit in their crimes against myself. It's doing less. I'm not saying what to do with taxes. I'm saying you need to look into who you give your money to and why, and choose for yourself what you want to do about it.
What am I gonna do?
This is fine. I'm okay with the events that are unfolding currently.
My choice to address these issues was to officially expatriate, relinquishing legal identity. If you want me to do a video on that, boosh the like button and remark below. For me, I don't sign W-4s or 1040s, at least not without knowing what I'm doing now. Instead, I would provide employers with the Notice of Withholding Agent Waiver. Although if I felt compelled to sign governmental documents, it must be done so not just without prejudice, but as authorized representative. This removes legal culpability as surety to the fiction under UCC 3-402b1. See episode 17 about our signature as a solution to attorneys' unlawful color of law presumptions. Link in the corner. The way I would handle IRS mail is by writing on it deceased civiliter mortis, no contract, return to sender, and returning it unopened. The mail was not sent to you, but was sent to the fictitious legal identity. The legal identity isn't a living being, it's a presumption.
Look who knows so much, huh? Well, it just so happens that your friend here is only mostly dead.
We are the living beings behind the legal identities. Opening mail is consent and agreement to the addressed legal identity as presumed, deceased, along with legal responsibility. Under Title 18, United States Code Section 1342, titled Fictitious Name or Address, it's a federal felony for the IRS to send mail to anyone as a fictitious legal name with a fictitious legal address under such false and fraudulent pretenses and misrepresentations. And likewise, it's a federal felony for us to open it. That's more reason to send it back.
She wrote upon it, return to sender.
FYI, that's also true for all courtroom mail and attorney mail as well. Fictitious legal names are usually in all uppercase and have a zip code, which is a federal district designation by law. I do not use zip codes on my mail for this reason. Zip codes are not required by postal code and are not actually part of an address, it's optional. This is known. For example, JPMorgan Chase 10K annual report filings prove that addresses do not include zip code. We can also write the word near before the zip code to indicate that the address is not in a federal district. All court cases required a zip code with the address because it conveyed federal legal jurisdiction.
I do not recognize the authority of a court that hangs the gold French flag.
Here is a DoD military tribunal courtroom for U.S. military officers under law of war with a gold fringe flag. Does the fringe look familiar? In such military courtrooms, justice can only be biased in favor of the IRS. Where are our law of peace courts without gold fringe flags? If the IRS were to show up at my door, I would close the door or ideally not open it. Then I would dial 911 to report the IRS agents as imposters, unlawfully impersonating federal government agents. Again, it was admitted in court that the IRS was not an agency of the United States government. They're subcontractors who misrepresented themselves as government agents. if I still felt compelled to pay IRS taxes, that because of the absurd complexity of the tax code, I would write the following on the return near my authorized representative's signature. Quote, take constructive notice that agents are ordered to make corrections and amendments to this return to resolve any compliance issues. End quote. This shifts at least some, if not all, legal responsibility to the IRS for the compliance of their return. Technically, it's not our return.
This is not my problem.
It's not his.
I don't care.
It's
he
mine.
scammed you.
Yes,
not
this is
me.
on us.
I want no responsibility.
So if and when you look around, there is a lot of information out there about the great IRS hoax.
And I'm not trying to be critical of the administration, but these are important questions.
The proverb, he who pays the piper calls the tune, comes to mind. Who are our elected officials actually representing, given that there is no taxpayer money? Why should I be complicit in being defrauded? Also, I think we need to talk about reparations for their extortion, misrepresentation, fraud, thefts, lawfare, and plethora of other crimes by the IRS against so many. How do we get our money back? Can I refile or amend all my returns to zero them out and get a full refund? Would they even refund everything as per their own laws? Or would the IRS investigate and sue me as if they were the victim of some made-up tax fraud being perpetrated against them? You know, so as to keep their illicit gains.
There's nothing to explain. You're trying to kidnap what I've rightfully stolen.
It's classic psychological blame-the-victim gaslighting, but backed by lethal color of law violence, lawfare, and a weaponized administrative and judicial system. Wouldn't it be nice to get refunded for all the taxpayer money we gave them that wasn't actually used for its stated purposes, but was stolen, rehypothecated, and even funded the United Nations empire to wage war on ourselves? So remember, it's just a belief that makes it more exciting to be extorted by the IRS than to keep what you earn. Listen to the tune they played.
Well, the nice, wonderful thing about IRS allegations is that so much of what they allege, they have no need to prove in a court of law. They can do so much of what they do administratively, and that's what they did to me. So this civil complaint process is done administratively. There's no actual judge that hears it. The IRS just conducts it on its own.
I hereby inform you on the powers entrusted to me under Section 47, Paragraph 7 of Council Order Number 438476 that Mr. Buttle, Archibald, residing at 412 North Tower, Shangri-La Towers, has been invited to assist the Ministry of Information with certain inquiries, and that he is liable to certain financial obligations as specified in Council Order RB/CZ/907/X. Sign here, please. There. Thank you. Same again, please. Just there. Press harder this time. Good.
Oh, but this is all about.
That is your receipt for your husband. Thank you. And this is my receipt for your receipt.
And that, in my view, is what this comes down to, where the government decides that it knows better than you what should be done with your earnings, and in fact, how you should conduct your life. The other road promises to renew the American spirit. It's a road of hope and opportunity. It places the direction of your life back in your hands where it belongs. I've not taken your time this evening merely to ask you to trust me. Instead, I ask you to trust yourselves. That's what America's all about. Our struggle for nationhood, our unrelenting fight for freedom, our very existence. These have all rested on the assurance that you must be free to shape your life as you're best able to. That no one can stop you from reaching higher or take from you the creativity that has made America the envy of mankind. One road is timid and fearful, the other bold and hopeful. In these 6 months, we've done so much and have come so far. It's been the power of millions of people like you who've determined that we will make America great again. You have made the difference up to now. You will make the difference again. Let us not stop now. Thank you. God bless you. Good night.
And may the odds be ever in your favor.
I would like to reinstate my previous shenanigans.
I didn't pull that off, did I? It's fine. It's fine.
Like, share, subscribe, and comment below.